Hey everybody, it's Neil and I'm really happy to be back with you guys again. Today we're going to take a look at my demo from a new product called Mosaic Tape. And I'll give you a quick overview about what tape is, but for all the juicy details, you can watch our product overview video that Luis did. Mosaic Tape's the fourth product in the Mosaic line, and this one's got a really cool sound to it. As the name states, tape, every source was run through analog tape, and that added a smooth top and kind of a warm sound to the sources. From altered strings and like gritty keys to tuned percussion and vocal pads, it's got an inspiring cinematic vibe that's very relevant in modern scoring. All right, so let's take a look at the first section here, and then we can talk about what I'm using and how I tweaked it and all that good stuff. Cool. All right, so let's see what we got here. I think when I started this track, I was trying to find some kind of foundational element, and I started with bass. With the Mosaic line, it's one NKI. It's like one preset, and then it's all snapshots, which we've covered in other videos. So in Contact, if you hit the snapshot button, boom. What am I using? I used a sound called Burnt Tuner. It happens to be like the default sound, which you could find in Playable under B. Where are we? Burnt Tuner. But I wanted to tweak it because I can't help myself. I am a tweaker. All right, so let's take a listen. All right, so what's going on here? So Mosaic, if we go to the main page, we've got 3 different channels in Mosaic. And that's true to all the Mosaic instruments. In tape, I've got 3 different parts playing. So if we solo the first one, and go to channel 1, it's called Lo-Fi Hover. And the beauty of Mosaic Tape with the 3 engines is you can layer 3 different sounds and have them play at the same time, or they can be just in a certain section of the keyboard. Some can overlap, some cannot. You can kind of taper off the end so it gets softer to kind of bridge the gap, or, you know, what's the word? Crossfade them together. Next sound I used is, let's see, channel 2 is called Baked Trombones. And that is definitely baked for 2 reasons. That's the name of the sound. But if we go to the main page where you can see all the effects in Mosaic, and again, if you watch the overview and some of the other videos about Mosaic and the engine, you can really get a better sense. We're just going to kind of focus on my demo. If we click on Drive, that's saturation and distortion. So this is channel 2 that we were just listening to, this baked trombones. So if we shut this off, saturation and distortion, that's what it was. So then we added some saturation, which seems to do nothing. It doesn't do nothing, but you know. And then with the distortion, you have options. You have like stomp box, amp, and lo-fi. And I use lo-fi, so that's why it's really crispy. And it cuts out a little on some of the notes because the lo-fi bitrate goes so low it just doesn't speak. But it works because the first sound that we have, and I'm going to mute the third, kind of covers some of the ground. So those 2 together. That's just the first sound. And that's the second, baked trombones. And then the last sound in here, it's called tube drift organ. I don't know who came up with that amazing name, but I like it. So let's listen to that one. All right, so all three of these together, this is how we made the sound. And it's really laying down the foundation. I know I'm spending a lot of time on this particular sound, but if we go to the original and listen, I'm curious to see what that sounds like. Yeah. So I did a lot to this. I shortened it up. The notes do not sustain as long. We need to go back to the user, Burnt Tuner, Neil 5. Yeah, if you go to the envelopes, they're really short, the release of the note. Like that one is 47 milliseconds. So that note is on and off in no time. That's the vibe. All right, so let's move on. And there's a ton of delay echoing. So that's kind of what I was going for, something kind of sinister and all that good stuff. Next sound up, which kind of opens the piece, it's called Giant Bottom Orchestra. And that has some modulation going on. The cool thing about Mosaic, you know, you have the macro sequencer, right? Which you turn it on, right? As soon as you hit play, it triggers it. It starts playing through this kind of, you know, this pyramid. You can choose different shapes, and then it modulates. So this is modulating a couple of things. If you look down here, you see the volume, and that orange, it's kind of ebbing and flowing. If we go to the mixer page, you can see that it's moving the pan as well. So there's kind of like it gives it some extra movement. And then it jumps up an octave there. So if we take a look at the part, it's just one long note sustained, and then we hit this higher note, and I did a little trick that I've done before where I just bent the note downwards. So if we start from there, let's hear it with the bass line. Gives it kind of a sinister vibe. And then another part comes in. If we go to bar 15, take a look at that. Old school reruns. Okay. Kind of a swell. So how does that fit into the mix here if we kind of throw these in? They kind of speak nicely with this previous part, this bottom orchestra kind of, and you've got this other old school pad just kind of playing a chordal thing underneath it, and then the rhythm is doing its thing. Let's check out what is happening in that patch, because I know it's cool to see what we've tweaked. There we go. So in this one, the original with all the channels playing, it was a little too kind of chorusy and swirly for me. I was looking for something a little more simple. Channel 3, and it's called VHS Air Flutes, which is under orchestral. I should probably explain this now. So if you're in options, right, you can get there by clicking any of these channels to browse the sounds, you'll see all these different sounds, right? So we've got all this covered in the overview video, but really quick, there's brass and horns, harp, strings, a lot of different stuff. Cool sound sources that were really manipulated, again, through tape to give it that kind of warmth and thickness and good juicy stuff. And then there's keys and tune percussion, there are choirs, and then there's noise and attacks, and those are cool for layers. If you want to add like a clicky sound to a keyboard part, that's cool to add to one of the channels. I didn't use that on this one in particular, but I'm just using this specific sound. And we want to keep that soloed. Let's move on and see what's going on. There's not much else in the Mosaic Tape department. And another thing, for a personal challenge on this piece, I kind of wanted to just use Mosaic Tape and see if I could cover all of the bases, you know, kind of get a cool bass line, get some kind of mid-range chordal stuff happening, and maybe address melody issues. The only thing I didn't want to cover was the rhythm, so I pulled up Damage 2 to work quickly. I used a bunch of loops and then later augmented with some hits. So let's take a look at what's going on down here. Cool groove, a lot of low ends, some ticky-tacky stuff, which I like. All right, so this part plays through into the next section. Why don't we take a look at that? All right, cool. So this next section, this kind of, let's call it a B section, has a few new things happening. So we're still using the giant bottom orchestra. Now there's some movement going on here. So low. That's just nice and evil sounding. I love it. Let's see. Also, Old School Reruns is playing. So this is more of a chordal thing. All right, so let's see how those two parts work together. So if we go to bottom orchestra, giant bottom orchestra, and the Old School Reruns together. Nice little change there in the end. All right, so that's kind of the glue of what's happening in this section. And then we bring in this synthetic string part, which we have not heard yet. And check this out. This one I had a lot of fun with. As you've seen in the menu, for presets that you can use. So there's arpeggiated, there's the playables that are just long notes, short notes, and then there's rhythmic, which uses like the gate to create rhythm. So this is an arpeggiated part, and I think I did a lot of tweaking on it. We can take a listen to what the original was, but it's basically me holding down, you know, chords with a little bit of an extra step in there, which I'll explain, and then using the arpeggiator on 2 of 3 channels here. So So let's see, the first one I have panned left, and if we go to the arpeggiator, if you look closely, it doesn't seem, like there's much going on here. The first note, the velocity is pushed up. That's what this means. And then above it, these really small kind of rectangular boxes, if you click those notes, it ties them together. So it's like ba, do, 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 do. So. And that kind of repeats. And then the other part, which is on the right, I have that panned on the right. You can see that in the mixer page, right? That's going to be over here. So again, an accent on one, but this time I let the 16th notes run free. You can see right here, it says 1/16, 1/16, and I'm tying notes in, let's see, the second quarter note, and then the third quarter note, 1, 2, 3, 4. All of those 4 16th notes making up the third quarter note are tied together. So together, they kind of play off each other. Actually, I can't solo 2 at once, so we'll listen. They play off each other in a way that we've got a left side and a right side, and the rhythms are a bit different, and the sounds are a little bit different. So let's take a listen now. So channel 2 is using this sound called violin cassettes, which is kind of cool. And then channel 3, if we click up here, you're going to see it's fluttering humans. And I wanted to thin it out because it is pretty busy and it ends up sounding like just a bed with the other parts playing. So I was like, how can I do that? Let me play with some of the MIDI. So you can see by like omitting certain notes or shortening them in the chords, that's also creating a little bit of randomness in the way this plays back with the arpeggiator. And I kept kind of playing with it against the chords. Yeah, so I think that sounds kind of cool. You get this kind of thick, ominous bed spelling out the chords. This arpeggiated part is plinkier sounding, and it kind of needs to be because there's a lot of thickness going on in the parts underneath it, this giant bottom orchestra and this old school reruns part. So again, like I was saying before, I kind of played around with the arpeggiated notes, with how long they were sustaining as chords, and then how they were being used with the actual arpeggiator. So why don't we move on and throw in the rhythm just to see how that sits with it. got Damage kind of cooking along. Again, playing some loops, but then I started playing with some larger drums, some big taiko ensembles and Armageddon. I don't want to spend too much time on Damage. That's a whole other topic. Click. So big booms, why did I do that? It's very busy on top of the arpeggiator, and the string parts, it's pretty thick, so let's just create some space. And as this section kind of grows, there's more rhythm happening. If we take a quick look, boom, 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 starts to get busier, pick up here. You get the idea. And then let's see, we wanted to bring in some melody elements. So from what this is telling me, it's called opening credits. Let's take a look at that. But that's not what I used, is it? Sometimes that happens. You write quickly and then you're like, hey, I'm going to name the track and then I'm going to go work on it. And then you're like, I don't like this sound. I'm going to pick another one. All right, so let's see if that's the case. So let's see what we got here for Tampered Music Box. And there's some awesome presets or snapshots as they're referred to in Mosaic. I am a tweaker. I just can't help it. So I went in and, you know, as you're writing, you want to find parts that work well. And the beauty of having, you know, an engine like this is you can use any of the 3 channels. You can EQ, distort, envelopes, all that good stuff, and modulate. So I was looking for a specific sound, and I went through a bunch of them to get a melody that worked with this kind of vibe. You know, it's a little stealthy, and then it's this kind of like, you know, kind of throwback vibe, if you will. Let's call this Tampered Music Box. And then, of course, it says Neil Tweak Change B. So you know that that went through at least a few tweaks. But I digress. So what do we got here? So this is viola on 2-inch. And that's a neat sound. Then next up in the second channel, and this is in keys and tune percussion. It's called Cathedral Tapes. Let's play those two together. So that's a noise layer. I didn't use a ton of those, but they're kind of neat. And it's subtle. Let's see if we can really hear that. So I pushed that up a bit, you know, a little more on that noise layer. And if we go to space, I've got the never-ending delay, right? So I've got my feedback way up on these first 2 channels. I got the width, so it's panning. It's like ping-ponging left and right, and there's a lot of delay. A lot of it gets swallowed up in the track. So if we listen to it with the other tracks, you'll hear... could hear how like it sounds wet and it sounds ambient with all that delay on it, but in the track it sits pretty well. So it's kind of crazy to have something be that wet and then you're like, in the track I don't hear it, but it does do its thing. So there's a break here where we drop the note. Let's go to where that is. So what's going on here? A move I've already done in the intro. I'm kind of bringing it back into the break. It's just, you know, a long note that has a lot of balls to it. And then I'm dropping the pitch about a whole step. And that's called Center Speaker Orchestra. So this part is a lo-fi brass part. It's a staccato part with a lot of delay to make it ring out longer. So that one's only there for the attack. And then if we go to channel 3, that one's using violin cassettes. So together. And there is a decent amount of movement. We've got pan kind of modulating. If we look at drive, it's kind of on and doesn't really need to be modulating. You know, if I do have distortion in the form of saturation on these two parts, the first part and the second part. There's a little bit of modulation on the drive. You can see that kind of orange like halo moving. And that's what's happening here with the macro sequencer. It's kind of going through its thing. Like I talked about earlier, you can draw these curves, you can choose different ones, and it modulates the sound or the volume or the panning or ADSR, EQ. There's really, it's pretty deep. You can really tweak this in a lot of cool ways. All right, so let's move on. At bar 47, for those keeping count, we go into our last section. Kind of leaves you hanging at the end, just kind of echoes out, delays out. All right, so let's check out what's going on here and what I used. We've got burnt tuner holding down the fort. And instead of bending that note, that is not quantized. Now it is. I'm just playing it down a half step. So and that's pretty much what that thing is doing until the end where it does. It does a pitch bend, which sounds pretty similar to just playing the note, but it's a little slicker. All right, so next up, we're using our Tape Tundra piano. All right, so I guess I started it earlier. This is white in Cubase. I'm using Cubase because I didn't like it, so I muted it. I hit this key and I muted what was there. So let's listen from where it starts. I like that sound. It's pretty cool. Let's check out what's going on with it. So the source is in keys and tune percussion, and it's called Lo-Fi Soft Piano. And I have a lot of delay. Again, there's a lot of kind of heavy long notes in this, and that delay helps kind of give it that ambient feel, that openness, at least in my opinion. As opposed to with it off. Still has a long note to it, like not a note, but it still has a long tail to it. And so there's a master reverb on the master effects page. It's doing just a little bit. That's funny. I have the note really sharp and short, and then this holy cathedral impulse that really gives it that kind of long tail. It's almost like in my mind I can kind of see the space, this really long kind of space, and the note thrown into it just has a really, I don't know, this cool ambient goodness. I guess the word was like, it almost, in my brain, my strange brain, it feels like it's almost this powdery kind of like ambience that comes off of it with this reverb. But, you know, maybe that's just me being weird. Okay, cool. So if we go back to putting the delay back on, and that's going to be under space. And what other parts are playing here? Just a little wee bit of something. It's a choir. It's called Betacam Voices. And let's see, I don't even know if we're really hearing that. It's super ghosted. Yes, we have a noise layer for this called bias damage. And that's probably pretty subtle in the mix. Yeah, I think my focus was obviously the piano sound and how it resonated. I was like, this works, and I didn't really go too far into, let's play with a noise layer and bring that up. It didn't seem necessary. All right, so going down to the next part, let's see what this is doing. Dropping a whole step. Is that a whole step? Yes, it is. 2 semitones. All right, so these three in concert together. And then we have another part that I believe is like a melody. That's creepy. So that's called Haunted B-swell pads. I can't even read. Let's see. It's supposed to say Haunted Bell Pads, and I made a mistake when I named it. Bell Pads, Neil 3. And this will get saved in my user folder forever to be there. Yeah, so this is pretty creepy. Let's find out what's making it tick. Dark TV Memories. That's a cool keyed and tuned percussion sound. If we go to channel 2, we'll see what we got there. Again, we're still in the keys in tune percussion, and this is a DX marimba. Nice. And then third part here. This says alien insects. And that's another noise layer. And that one you can definitely hear in this patch. So if we take a look at the two kind of melodic standouts here, which is this Tundra piano and the Haunted Bell pads, and play those together just to see how they kind of mesh. Little quantize there, buddy. This is supposed to be there. Nobody noticed. Now we all know. So those are the two parts working together, and the sounds are kind of creepy, and also the melody is obviously dark. So giving it that kind of that vibe. All together now. And that's the piece. That's the end of it. Kind of a cool vibe going on with the drums. Like I had said in the previous section, I brought in some more stuff from Damage, Taiko Ensembles, and Armageddon 2 with some bigger drums, and they start to really pound away, which helps build the energy. So just drums. Pretty beefy drums. These are cool. I've used these before. If we just solo this, it's a flourish. I like that kind of really right into the downbeat like that. Cool. So enough of my talking. Why don't we go back to the top and take a listen through and see how this all gels together. So that's the piece. Thanks for watching. I hope you guys really enjoyed it and got something out of it, and got a sense of what Mosaic Tape sounds like and is about. I think it's a pretty exciting instrument for that kind of modern scoring sound. There are 3 sources to choose from, sources or buckets, so to speak. You've got orchestral, you've got keys and tune percussion, we've got choirs, and then additional things like noise layers and attacks. So using the 3 channels, you can really create your own sounds or use some of the dozens and dozens that we've created for you already, which sound great right out of the box. If you guys haven't already, please subscribe to our Heavyocity channel. And if you enjoy the video, hit like. Please check out Mosaic Tape. We have a whole bunch of other resources on the website, different videos, preset playthroughs, product overviews, demos that we've written in. This is one of them. There's a whole bunch of others up there to give you a sense of what it sounds like. And that's it, guys. Take care, and we'll see you next time.